The room pulsed with a quiet, sterile hum, a rhythm as steady as the ceiling lights that cast silvery beams across rows of expressionless students. Screens flickered behind them, displaying archived images of distant wars, planets scorched by ancient weapons, and the elongated faces of alien diplomats frozen in history. Seated at the center of it all, dressed in the same regulation white uniform as his classmates, was Elias Rourke, the only human in the room. His fingers hovered above the glassy surface of his desk. History pulsed beneath his hands in cold, blue lettering, surrounded by thumbnails of battles and peace treaties. He glanced at the others, species with translucent skin, fractal pupils, even one being whose body shimmered like molten glass. All sat calmly, reading, absorbing, unmoved. Elias was trying to breathe slower, trying not to sweat, trying not to think about what he'd just seen on the feed. The fall of Tangora 7, a war humanity had triggered over a mining dispute, which ended in the forced displacement of 3 million Talari refugees. A Talari sat 2 seats ahead of him. She hadn't even flinched at the footage. Elias, meanwhile, could feel his lungs tightening. "You're holding your breath again," came a voice beside him, calm but penetrating. He turned. Counselor Arvin stood beside his desk, a tall, silver-skinned figure with eyes too large and too still to be comforting. Their voice carried no judgment, only data. Arvin's presence had become a second heartbeat to Elias. Always there, always watching. "Sorry," Elias murmured. "Shall I adjust the filter?" Arvin asked. Elias shook his head. He didn't want another buffer between him and the truth. "Not today." "Proceed," Arvin said simply, and returned to the shadows near the back of the class, like a warden who preferred not to rattle chains unnecessarily. The instructor, a semi-holographic projection known only as Archivist Nkili, resumed its narration. Its voice was harmonized across octaves, echoing softly as it walked them through the collapse of the Martian Concord and the subsequent formation of the Interstellar War Tribunal. Elias should have been focusing on the politics, the treaties. Instead, he was trapped in the image replaying in his mind, a human officer ordering orbital strikes on refugee camps, his voice casual, almost bored. The recording had been unsealed only a decade ago, when Earth petitioned for full academic access. The petition had barely passed, only on the condition that humans be supervised during any historical curriculum containing armed conflict. A sharp tone sounded. "Discussion protocol engaged," Nkili announced. "Elias Rourke, your perspective on the ethical implications of unilateral wartime displacement is requested." His heart hit his ribs like a drum. He could feel every eye, some with no pupils, some glowing faintly, turned toward him. Even those without traditional senses seemed to pause, tuning in to the frequency of his discomfort. Elias looked down, then up again. His voice cracked. It was unjustifiable. There's no ethical framework in which forced relocation on that scale, on any scale, can be excused. A moment passed. "Specify," Nkili said. He swallowed. The commanding officers claimed the camps were a threat vector. They weren't. The scans proved it. They just wanted control of the transport corridor. They knew the tribunal wouldn't intervene fast enough to stop them. And they were right. There was no reaction from the class. No nods. No frowns. Just quiet data absorption. Arvin, however, made a notation on the tablet in their palm. "Do you believe your species has learned from this?" Nkili asked. "I want to say yes," Elias said, voice low. "But that would require proof. And I'm sitting in a history class where my presence is only allowed under adult supervision." A flicker of something moved through the class. Not laughter, not sympathy, but perhaps recognition. "Insight acknowledged," Nkili said and moved on. Elias sat back, muscles burning from tension. He hated this feeling, like he was an exhibit on trial, a relic of something best left buried. But worse than the judgment was the absence of it. They didn't hate him. They didn't even dislike him. They simply regarded him as a statistical liability. A whisper came from the left. "You okay?" It was Keitel, one of the few students who regularly spoke to him. Their voice, like leaves rubbing together, was hard to interpret emotionally, but Elias appreciated the effort. He nodded.
Yeah.
Just intense. You were honest. That matters, Keitel said. Elias looked at them, their vine-like fingers wrapped neatly around a stylus. Does it? To them. To you, they answered. Arvin watched the exchange, but didn't interrupt. The lesson continued, now shifting to the Aloran peace theory, which proposed that species who surpassed 3 planetary cycles without initiating war naturally developed neural inhibitors for aggression. Humans, of course, hadn't. The data showed their brains remained uniquely plastic, capable of learning, yes, but also unlearning restraint under pressure. Elias wondered if it would always be like this. Learning through shame. Studying his own species under glass while pretending the reflection didn't cut. Then something shifted in the air. Nkelia's form flickered. A new window opened behind the instructor, displaying a list marked, Restricted Historical Content. Arvin moved quickly. That module is not scheduled, they said, stepping forward. Emergency override, human viewing clearance revoked. But it was too late. For just a second, Elias saw the title. Earth, the Solarchiv Massacre. He hadn't heard of it. And yet, somehow, he knew it was going to matter. More than anything they'd studied so far. He looked at Arvin, who was already recalibrating his desk and muting incoming feed lines. The counselor's expression, though unreadable, seemed tense. Elias leaned back, pulse steady now but cold. That title would come again. If not today, then soon. And he would be ready. Or at least he'd try. The hallway outside the historical archives was too quiet. Not in the serene, contemplative way that alien facilities usually were, but in a way that made Elias feel like the walls were holding their breath. Arvin walked beside him, perfectly composed as always. Your heart rate has increased 22%. I'm aware, Elias muttered. They were headed to the reflection chamber. An enforced debriefing protocol triggered when a human student experienced unregulated exposure to restricted content. In this case, the accidental reveal of the Solarchiv Massacre. Elias hadn't stopped thinking about it since. Not just the name, but the way Arvin had reacted. Immediate, assertive, unlike their usual calm. It wasn't just protocol. It was fear. Inside the chamber, the walls were smooth, light-reactive, adapting to his mood, currently dim, stormy. Elias sank into the diagnostic chair, without being asked. Electrosynaptic nodes clicked into place at his temples. You may begin, Arvin said, settling into the adjacent console. What was it? Elias asked without preamble. The Solarchiv Massacre. It's not on the public timelines. Not even in the restricted cross-species databases. That is correct, Arvin replied. It is sealed under Category Theta, events likely to induce recursive trauma in human subjects. Then why did it show up? There was a server integration error during the archivist update. It has been corrected. Why hasn't it been taught? Arvin hesitated. The pause was brief, but in a species that processed thought nearly instantaneously, it meant something. It was determined that knowledge of the Solarchiv event would disrupt the psychological stability of human learners beyond acceptable thresholds. Elias laughed, short and bitter. You mean it would break us? Yes, Arvin said quietly. The silence that followed wasn't clinical. It was personal. Elias leaned forward. Was it worse than Tangora 7? There is no ethical utility in comparison, Arvin said. Let me rephrase. Did we do it? Arvin looked at him then, eyes like still pools. Not you, Elias. That answer didn't satisfy. It never did. Every time they separated you from humanity, it felt like a trick of words, a kindness that did nothing to erase the echo of ancestral guilt. What are we even doing here? Elias muttered, more to himself than to Arvin. Studying history we're not allowed to know. Being treated like unstable particles. You are not unstable, Arvin said. You are unfinished. The words caught him off guard. Not because they were cruel, but because they weren't. That's worse, Elias said. Arvin didn't respond. The diagnostic chair chimed. Neural patterns confirmed. High emotional variance, memory consolidation in progress, no aggressive ideation. Your session is complete, Arvin said. I'm not, Elias replied. They walked in silence back through the crystalline corridors of the academy, glass and light refracting around them like a kaleidoscope built by gods. It was beautiful, but not welcoming. Elias still felt like a guest. As they approached his dorm quadrant, he slowed. I want to see it, he said. Arvin stopped. You are not authorized. Then petition it. I have the right to know. You have the right to heal first. He shook his head. Healing from what? From something I haven't even seen yet. Arvin's gaze softened, if such a thing was possible for a face carved from mercury. From the truth of who your people used to be. Maybe that's exactly what I need. Arvin didn't reply. Instead, they turned and disappeared down the corridor, leaving Elias alone with the stillness and the echo of what he couldn't unhear. That night, sleep didn't come. Dreams flickered and faded before they could form, like his subconscious was stalling for time. In the morning, his eyes burned, and he had no memory of dreaming, just a sharp, residual ache, like a wound hiding under the skin. Keitel found him at breakfast, barely touching his synth meal. You're quiet, they said. I'm always quiet, Elias replied. You're vibrating.
He looked down. His leg was bouncing.
They showed me something I wasn't supposed to see, he admitted. Keitel tilted their head. Did it change you? I don't know yet. Keitel paused. Then maybe it already has. The bell chimed for class. History again. Elias almost didn't go. Inside, the lesson was routine. Cold summaries, artifact analysis, comparative timelines. Nothing controversial, nothing new. But when Archivist Nkili summoned him for a reading, Elias stood taller than usual. Describe the Treaty of Varan 4 in relation to human behavioral projections, Nkili prompted. Elias stared at the text before him, but didn't read it. Instead, he spoke. I think we project what we're afraid will become again. The room went still. Nkili processed. Clarify. We build treaties like fences, not to keep others out, but to keep ourselves from breaking loose. Arvin, stationed silently at the rear, tilted their head. Nkili's form blinked twice. Interpretive logic recognized. Response filed. When the session ended, Arvin approached slowly. You're circling something, they said. I know. You want to go straight to the core of it. I need to, Elias said. Arvin studied him for a moment longer, then gave the slightest nod. Then prepare yourself. For what? For the truth. It has teeth. The chamber was smaller than Elias expected. Not grand or ceremonial, not even guarded. Just a room, oval, dim, almost sterile, deep in the restricted levels of the academy. It felt like a secret the universe had tried to forget, sealed away not by force, but by silence. Arvin stood beside the access panel, motionless. For once, there were no calibration tools, no bioscanners, no layers of intervention. Just the two of them and the node. I had to override 12 protocols to gain you access, Arvin said. If you collapse, I will carry you out myself. That's comforting, Elias said, his voice dry. Arvin didn't smile. They never did. Ready, they asked. Elias nodded. The node flared to life with a sharp hum, and the air rippled. Not like a projection, but a memory folding itself open. Vivid, too real, like the walls had been peeled back. He stood inside the Solarca facility now, or its last recorded moments. The visual feed adapted to his neural profile, wrapping him in full sensory immersion. Dust floated like frozen ash. Lights flickered above dozens of preservation capsules, each housing scrolls, data cores, relics, voices from 100 species. It was not a military site, not even a research base. It was a library, and it was burning. The memory didn't hold back. Screams tore through the quiet like glass shattering underwater. Flames licked the rafters, triggered by sonic implosion charges, human-made. Symbols on the walls, ancient and irreplaceable, cracked beneath the pressure. Figures ran through the smoke. Archivists, alien and human both. Some tried to save collections, others each other. A child, a real one, not a training sim, sobbed into the folds of an Adrexian caretaker's robe. Then a second explosion dropped part of the roof. Elias reached out instinctively, forgetting it wasn't real. The final frame froze, a human soldier, helmet off, staring at the devastation. His face was blank. Not cruel, just detached. He raised a communicator to his mouth and said, "The objective is complete. No need for retrieval." Then it ended. Elias staggered back, breath ripped from his lungs. The node dimmed, returning the room to silence. Arvin moved fast, catching him before he hit the floor. "You saw it. I saw it."
"Speak."
Elias pressed a fist to his chest, grounding himself. It wasn't war. It wasn't strategy. It was fear. The Soul Archive was a vault of non-human memory. Someone, somewhere, thought it was too powerful. "Knowledge can destabilize regimes," Arvin said softly. "But this?" Elias shook his head. "They erased culture.
History.
They burned a library to silence voices that weren't theirs." He looked up at Arvin. "And the worst part is the soldier. He didn't hate them. He just didn't care." Arvin's face betrayed nothing. "And what does that tell you?" "That indifference is more dangerous than rage." Elias stood. His limbs trembled, but his spine held. "Now you understand," Arvin said, "why we're not allowed to study history without a war counselor?" Arvin nodded once. "Humans are not prohibited from history because of your past. You're prohibited because of your potential to misunderstand it." Elias swallowed. "And what now?" "You return. You learn. And you tell the truth carefully. When it's time." He looked down at his hands, still shaking. "I don't want to be them."
"You're not," Arvin said.
"You chose to look." When they left the chamber, the sky above the academy was shifting, twilight casting purple streaks through the glass dome, stars beginning to blink into view. Keitel was waiting by the dormitory entrance, as if they had known.
"You saw it," they said.
Elias nodded. "Are you whole?" "No," he said. "But I'm clear." They walked beside him in silence for a time, then asked, "Would you still sit in that classroom? Knowing what you know now?" Elias looked toward the central tower, where tomorrow's history lesson would unfold with perfect calm and well-meaning distance. "I have to," he said. "If we only learn the parts we're proud of, we'll never change." He paused. "And I think we're supposed to." Keitel placed a vine-like hand on his shoulder. Alien, strange, grounding. Arvin watched from the corridor, silent again. The academy lights dimmed, signaling evening closure. The archives remained sealed behind levels of clearance, too dangerous for routine study, too volatile for most minds. But Elias had seen. And in that fragile, brutal knowing, a different kind of war had begun. Not for territory or dominance, but for remembrance. And this time, he wouldn't look away.